The first sign that something was wrong wasn't the backhoe. It was the silence. I woke up to the hum of my well pump cutting off mid-cycle, something it had never done in 20 years. By the time I stepped outside, there was a truck idling near my pump house, and a man in a reflective vest hammering a bright orange notice onto my fence. Unauthorized water source. Scheduled for decommission. Decommission. That's the word they used. Like my well was some abandoned factory instead of the reason their lawns stayed green every summer. I walked down the gravel path and asked who sent him. He didn't hesitate. HOA authorization. Of course it was. Ever since the new board took over, they'd been obsessed with uniform standards. Same mailbox color, same fence height, same shade of grass. The only problem, my property isn't even in their HOA. It predates their development by 72 years. When those homes were just empty lots and broken dreams from a bankrupt developer, my well was already pumping. About 20 minutes later, Carol Dempsey, HOA president, self-appointed guardian of suburban perfection, pulled up in her white SUV. She stepped out holding a clipboard like it was a badge of authority. "Your private well violates community infrastructure standards," she announced loudly enough for two of her board members to hear. "We're shutting it down." I asked her a simple question. "Did you notify the county utilities office before authorizing excavation on a registered agricultural well?" She blinked just once. Then she said, "We don't need county approval for internal matters." Internal matters. That's when I realized something important. They had no idea what that internal matter was actually connected to. 10 years ago, when their developer's water contract collapsed during inspection, the entire project nearly died. No water, no building permits. The county stepped in temporarily, and that temporary solution was my well. A legal emergency supply agreement tied their main distribution line to my pump station. Temporary became permanent when their replacement contract failed. I never advertised it. The water company handled billing. I just kept the system maintained and let the checks arrive. Carol didn't know any of that. Or worse, she never bothered to look. The contractor lowered the backhoe bucket and bit into the dirt near the main junction valve. The metal teeth scraped against the pipe, and right at that moment, my phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again and again. Missed calls from unknown numbers. A text from the county utilities supervisor. "Why is the north sector pressure dropping?" I looked up the hill toward the neighborhood. Sprinklers had stopped mid-spray. The decorative fountain at the entrance sputtered like it was choking. A homeowner came running out of his garage holding his phone in the air. Another shouted that his kitchen sink had gone dry. Carol's expression shifted from confident to confused in under 10 seconds. "Tell him to stop digging," I said calmly. She tried to argue that they were within their rights, but before she could finish, a county SUV came speeding down the road. The utilities supervisor stepped out, took one look at the exposed line, and asked a single question. "Who authorized interference with an active emergency supply junction?" Silence. The contractor slowly pointed at Carol. The supervisor walked over to me. "Your agreement is still active, correct?" "It is." He exhaled through his teeth like someone who just seen a lawsuit forming in real time. Because what Carol thought was a private backyard well was actually feeding water to over 400 homes. Not partially, not as backup, entirely. Let me ask you something. If someone tried to shut down the very system keeping their own neighborhood alive, would you stop them immediately, or let them understand the consequences first? Within minutes, residents were flooding down the street demanding answers. Toilets wouldn't refill. Pools stopped cycling. Irrigation systems went silent. Phones were ringing across the entire subdivision. And standing there beside an open trench in my yard, Carol finally understood what she had touched. But the real problem wasn't the pressure drop. It was what the county supervisor said next. The real problem wasn't the pressure drop. It was a liability. The county supervisor didn't yell, but his tone changed in a way that made everyone quiet down fast. He asked Carol for the authorization paperwork. She shuffled through her clipboard, flipping pages that suddenly didn't seem very powerful. "This is an internal HOA compliance action," she said, trying to steady her voice. He shook his head. "You excavated a registered agricultural well tied to an active county emergency supply agreement. That's not internal. That's infrastructure." You could actually see the moment it clicked for the crowd gathering behind her. Homeowners were walking down from the hill now, some still holding dry garden hoses, others on speakerphone with plumbers and pool technicians. One man shouted that his restaurant-grade kitchen had no water pressure. Another said his elderly mother's home medical equipment required running water. The supervisor turned to the contractor and ordered an immediate halt. The backhoe went silent. Dust settled around the exposed pipe like smoke after a small explosion. Then he looked at me and asked, "Do you intend to suspend supply pending investigation?" That question carried weight, because under the agreement, interference without notice allowed me to terminate service until compliance was restored. Legally, I could have shut the valve and let the entire neighborhood sit dry while the lawyers sorted it out. And believe me, part of me considered it. After months of warning letters, petty violation notices, and Carol's constant threats about bringing my property up to community standards, it would have felt satisfying. But here's the thing about power. You don't show it by reacting emotionally. You show it by controlling the the outcome. I told him I would continue supplying water under emergency commercial rates until the easement violation was resolved and all damages were paid. The supervisor nodded slowly. He understood what that meant. Triple the current rate, immediate inspection fees, county oversight. Suddenly, this wasn't a backyard dispute. It was a financial event. Carol tried to object, saying the HOA couldn't approve such an increase without a board vote. The supervisor cut her off. "You already acted without a vote." A murmur spread through the crowd. Someone asked how much the increase would cost per household. When the number was mentioned, several homeowners turned and stared directly at her. The confidence she'd walked in with was completely gone. "Let me ask you something. How fast do you think authority disappears when the people you represent realize you just cost them thousands?" Because it happened in minutes. Phones came out. Someone started recording. Another homeowner demanded to see the HOA's legal counsel. Carol kept saying this was a misunderstanding, but misunderstandings don't usually involve county vehicles and exposed water mains. Within 48 hours, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney. Formal apology, acknowledgement of unauthorized interference, agreement to cover repair costs, and accept emergency rate adjustments until a renegotiated contract could be finalized. They requested a meeting at my earliest convenience. The same board that tried to shut me down was now asking for my schedule. A week later, Carol resigned, citing personal reasons. The board issued a carefully worded statement about procedural errors, and the residents. They suddenly became very polite whenever they drove past my gate. The water still flows every morning, sprinklers ticking in perfect rhythm, pools refilling, fountains running like nothing ever happened. But now, every single person in that neighborhood knows exactly where it comes from. And more importantly, they know what happens when someone tries to shut it off without understanding who really controls the source.